everyone, and welcome to Modcast Episode 7. To joining me is my co-host, Kris Takahashi. Hey, Kris.
Yo.
And our special guest today is Oxhorn. Hey, Oxhorn, how you doing?
Hey, everybody, I'm doing well.
Fantastic. I'm actually a big fan of your Oxhorn. I've been watching, but one video I actually quite like of yours is your modding philosophy. It's not your most watched video, but it's actually one of my favorites.
Well, thanks. I've actually been surprised at how many people have been watching it recently. I produced it many months ago, but taking a look at my analytics, it seems to be finding a new revival online.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
That might have something to do with the fact that Bethesda has perhaps abandoned their lore throne, and now people are searching for a
hero.
Yes, a hero that can show them the lore, that doesn't shove Morgan Yu's spacesuit into your Pip-Boy. Maybe there's a different way, No, but I watched it months ago and I really liked it. I love your lore videos, but I quite like that one because I've always had that kind of philosophy, but it's kind of been unspoken, and it's generally how I make my mods. Right, I try and make them fit them in as seamlessly as possible into the main game. If they have some form of little standing out or standing out like a sore thumb, it generally kind of occupies my mind, and I make patches just to make them fit in much better. But I've kind of argued with people when I say, oh, well, I want to put a mod in like this, and they look at me, I feel like they're looking at me funny from behind the computer screen and saying, it's just a mod, who cares, why make you can put the Spider-Man's costume in there, and it doesn't matter, because you can mod your game. But I feel like, I've always believed that mods can make your game better and richer. Like if they're lore-friendly, or tone-friendly, or theme-friendly, as you put it in the video. And generally, your videos were the first I've come across that's kind of echoed that. I mean,
well, I agree, and I think many players feel the same way. They don't always express it that way, and so when they go and they look for mods, they look for things that fit in with the lore of the game. One of the reasons we all play, I think, Fallout is because we just fell in love with the atmosphere in the world and the alternate history, and that fiction, that story has really captivated our imaginations. And many of us, at least myself, I don't like being pushed out of that. I don't like that illusion being broken. And there are so many mods out there that break that illusion. And that's fine. One of the wonderful things about modding is that you can make your game completely your own. That's the beautiful thing about playing a Bethesda game, is once you get it, it's yours, and you can play it any way you want. You can mod it any way you want, and some people don't mind having non-lore friendly mods, and that's perfectly fine with their gameplay.
Yeah. If
but for me,
are any indication,
I really like staying within the look and feel of original Fallout. So, unoctium, when you come out with mods that harken back to previous Fallouts, those are the kind I really just cherish.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's like me personally, when I see when they bring out an assault rifle from Norway, for example, that came out in 1996 or something, I'm okay-ish with it. But when it looks like it just came out of a factory, and that's the only paint job you get, I'm just like, I want to download this, but I can't. I'm ready to come over to you, but you're just like, you're saying no. This gun will look like it comes out of a factory, and you have no choice. So, because in the old, Fallout New Vegas had no problem with putting in modern guns, they just called it something different, and just said, look, it would have been developed anyway, it might have had a different name, and Fallout 1 was like that as well. So, but I feel like very few modders generally try for something like that, and very few YouTubers will try for something like that, but I feel with me and Kris and you, we try and aim for that kind of place, because I think you're right. The audience do want that. They do sort of quietly desire that, if you know what I mean. They quietly say, I wish this was more lore friendly. I wish this fit in better, if you know what I mean.
And I think when things don't fit in, they kind of stand out like a sore thumb, even when players don't exactly know why. It's a little unsettling for them. And I think one of the greatest examples is the backpack that came out with the Creation Club. Many players loved the idea of getting a backpack, and I think a backpack was something that was needed, to help with carrying capacity and to just make things a little bit more immersive. I've always enjoyed having mods that add pouches or satchels to power armor, for example, to explain terrain, how you can carry a greater amount when using power armor when your power armor doesn't have any pockets. But the backpack that came out, I was frustrated by it, and I expressed as much in the video review I did on it, simply because it looked like something you'd see a 22-year-old guy wearing on a college campus. It looked like it had been designed in 2017, not like it had been designed either in the 1950s or in an alternative timeline. And
you saw it at the Gap somewhere, or Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah, it looks like it would work really well on a display model in a mall window, right?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I loved so many things about it, having all of the different decals you can put on it, the patches, the stickers. That was great. Functionally, it's fine, but it just felt out of the world to me. And so I said as much in my review.
Well, your review, I was trying to place the video in my mind. It was actually a review of Creation Club where you fully expressed your problems with Creation Club. But it's like when I was watching that video when you named one mod thematic and practical, where you have all these beds and whatever the quality of the NIF is, they were kind of hitched up on barrels or hitched up on wood, and it looks like someone just took some stuff from the wasteland and put it together, and it makes the settlements feel more immersive. You know what I mean? It looks like something from the post-apocalypse as you put it in the video.
Yeah, I love thematic and practical. I forget the name of the fellow who put it together. It's not on the tip of my tongue, but he put such thought into every little design that he made. I mean, he's got the Raider tab where he's just taken plywood and spare tires and barrels and, straw pillows, and he's pieced them together in really creative ways to make unique chairs and beds and bunk beds and tables that you think would work in that world. If you were to imagine a scavenger walking into Hangman's Alley, and if you were going to be setting up a coffee table on a bed, this is the kind of stuff that he'd put together. We don't find that in the base game, but when we install a mod that brings it to our game, it still feels like it fits in the world, and I relish mods like that.
It makes the game much larger, as it were, because when you're bringing in a mod that doesn't fit, it kind of splits things up and it kind of reduces things. I don't know how to describe it pretty much, but it makes it more into a game. Where if you bring things in like that, it makes the experience larger. It allows you to suspend your disbelief even further upwards, if you know what I mean. And but you set out a bunch of rules, not rules, but principles in that modding video, your modding philosophy video, where you said it has to be tone friendly or theme friendly. It has to be lore friendly. It can't defy the game system more. Is that right? And there was a fourth one, maybe.
Oh, it's been so long since I've made that video that I don't even recall all of the rules that I put down for myself. But
yeah,
sorry, go on.
It's kind of like movies. Sometimes you go to a movie and the filmmaker is the filmmaker will do one of two things. He's either trying to make something really funny or clever and say a message, and in those situations, anything goes. As long as the message gets across, it's fine. But some filmmakers are really trying to sell a world. And if they do anything like tell a joke that's pertaining to a modern audience, it just pops you out of that world a little bit. You're suddenly no longer experiencing that world. You're now in 2017 and you're listening to a joke that only makes sense to people in 2017, and that it detracts from the world. It robs you of the joy you get from immersing yourself in that world. And it's the same with games. When you install mods, or at least for me, when I install mods, I like installing mods that don't pop me out of that world.
Yeah, while expanding the experience. So it's like the Blade Runner film coming out, for example. I mean, that's adding to the Blade Runner universe. But if they do something untoward in that film, that's reminds us of ourselves, the whole film just collapses in your head. It doesn't become a world anymore, if you know what I mean, or Star Wars, for example.
Yeah. So there are some things that I'm okay with. Like, for example, the way that Bethesda decided to deal with power armor in Fallout 4 is completely different than how they dealt with it in the previous games and how it was dealt with in Fallout 1 or 2. But stuff like that doesn't bother me because the way and the way I think many players see it is if you're taking a look at the world of Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas, it looks very different from the world of Fallout 4, but you can always say that you're viewing the same universe but through a more a dirtier lens, so to speak. So it's kind of like looking at an old photograph. You don't pick out all of the details that you normally would had you been standing there in, say, the 18th century at that time when the photograph was taken. You would have been able to pick out more of the humanity of that time, more of the color of that time. All of that is lost when you're looking at this old, grainy, scratched photograph. And that's how I see some of the older Fallout games, what may have been tried, what the game makers may have tried to convey to us, at the time, they were limited simply by the technology available at that time. But now that the technology is there today, we can better understand what they were going for in Fallout 4. I believe even in Fallout New Vegas, they talked about how you should be using power armor as a machine you get into and operate rather than a suit you wear, but the technology didn't exist to implement that in the game at the time. So that was always part of the Fallout principle, and we finally see it realized in Fallout 4. So stuff like that, even though it's vastly different from the previous games, doesn't jar the experience for me, and so I like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, generally, you get this impression of the principles you have about this. I think the last thing you might have expected was the Bethesda to break all of them in Creation Club. Right?
Yeah, that was one of the... I've been disappointed with the implementation of Creation Club. I wanted to stand back and let it do its thing. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt and to see what they would come up with. And some of the stuff was nice. I liked the handmade shotgun. That was great. I enjoyed the Gauss rifle that came out. That was great. Even the horsepower armor, that worked. It was okay. It worked for me. But when you bring things from different universes, completely different universes, like the universe of Prey, and you give me Morgan's spacesuit from the Prey universe, and I'm supposed to be tromping around the glowing sea in that, I'm thinking, this isn't the same universe. This kind of breaks it for me. When you give me a bunch of Doom armor and you've got a big rip in the crotch and the entire shirt is missing and you tell me that this has the same radiation resistance as a hazmat suit.
Oh, yeah.
You're kind of spoiling it for me, fellas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever played, you've mentioned him before in your videos, Edible Grenade 12, who's also known as Sovereign Wars. He did the Bioshock power armor, and he also did the TAS-51 Skyrim power armor, basically.
Yes.
And what he did for those power armor, you kind of suggested in your video, like, oh, this kind of doesn't fit, so you kind of just push it to the side. But the least he did, he kind of turned the Elder Scrolls into a comic universe within the game. So he basically just said, oh, the power armor's there, right? He didn't explain that, but he said, oh, Elder Scrolls fits in this universe because it's a fictional universe. And he did the same with the Bioshock thing. While it might have not been Rapture itself, there's an implication that, it's a kind of evokes Rapture and it's kind of in this universe. But that's like sorry,
I can appreciate all of the talent and the creativity that goes into mods like that. I personally don't use those kinds of mods in my gameplay because in order for me to buy the idea that this is part of a comic universe, like the Avengers of the Fallout universe or something, then I'd have to find a reference to that in the game itself. And the game isn't referencing Bioshock. The game never references the Elder Scrolls. So it's a bit of a leap for me to believe that those are just comic universes with... What I would love to see is, maybe if we get... if we could find props or toys that deal with like the Captain Cosmos or, and this is why I love this Silver Shroud stuff. That all exists in the comic universe, but we can find some of those props in the real world and use them, as armor or weapons. So that's the kind of stuff that I'd prefer to see.
Yeah, but I understand that point, but it's like, at least, I appreciate that too, but at least that modder kind of tried to sort of fit it in. When Creation Club beams the Prey armor into your Pit-Boy as soon as you come out of Vault 101, supposedly looking for Sean, and then all this weird stuff just pops in your back. I mean, because I wanted to like Creation Club, as you said, just kind of like you, and you want to get on board with it, but you feel like you'd rather them try harder than something like that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think Bethesda has... They're in an awkward position with the Creation Club of trying to please many different players that have many different tastes. So players like you and I are going to really relish stuff that stays within the lore of the world, and many other players are really not going to care. And so Bethesda's going to be making a business decision. Is a Prey spacesuit, is it going to sell well? Is the Doom suit and the BFG, are they going to sell well? They have to make that gamble and then decide whether or not to put it on the Creation Club. What we lack are the sales analytics that they have. So has this gamble paid off for them? I'd be really interested to see whether or not the more lore-friendly stuff that they produce is selling well or greater than some of the non-lore-friendly stuff that they've produced. And if it has, then that would be a great argument for Bethesda to stick with the lore of their game, even when it comes to the Creation Club, instead of creating a bunch of stuff that knocks you out of the world. But ultimately, we don't have that data.
Well, like I mentioned before, if the hot files are any indication, we're going to be seeing a lot of bikini armor in the next few months.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it's not going to be very satisfying unless you have a modded game that allows you to see a little bit more skin, because you got some pretty epic long john, well, not long johns, but some large underwear on both the male and female characters in Fallout 4, so bikinis wouldn't really work well, would they?
Well, I mean, you can have they're giving you some skin in the form of the Doom armor.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The ab window.
Yeah.
There, you can see his like six pack.
See, I had no idea they looked like that. When I actually looked up I just thought, when I saw it, I thought it looked ridiculous. And then when I looked up the old Doom art, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that armor shows off a whole lot
1980s,
of inner thigh.
1980s were a crazy time. In defense, though, of like the more in-depth lore-friendly mods, you tend to see those rack up more endorsements over time. Like, they may not show up on the Hot Files. Hot Files has a specific algorithm where it's like 2 weeks. Like, you only have 2 weeks from the release date to get on there. Otherwise, they'll never be on there. And, like, the lore-friendly stuff tends to kind of just slowly, gradually grow. But they end up with more endorsements than the bikini armors and the hot followers.
Yeah, that's definitely like one of those quiet things where people quietly appreciate the fact that you're trying to make it fit in the game. But, like, Halo armor would shoot up to, like, 300 endorsements in a week. But then people slowly go, this doesn't fit, and then uninstall, where, again, I'm not trying to, like, me and Chris's mods, people were like, oh, this fits, this,
No, I'm all for tooting our own horn.
Yeah.
that's what we do.
But generally, like, you feel like you try and expand the scope, and then you try and make it fit. That's the issue that, like, me and Chris were talking before, how some of these mods, the scope is tiny, I think. Like, when you've played my mods, and you see a lot of object modifications there that have a lot of perk requirements. And generally, I tried to tell Chris earlier that I try and make the mods stay with you the whole game. So you might get the game and the armor at an early level, and you slowly develop upwards. And I generally try and accommodate different perks and have different abilities and things like that. And that's the temporal that lasts you the whole game. With these Creation Club stuff, it not only costs $4 for these things. Once you see it for 1 minute, that's it, And
I've been curious. I've been wanting to hear your opinion on this, since after downloading and installing your mods and enjoying them for quite some time, we then see the Chinese stealth armor and the Hellfire suit appear on Creation Club, and I'm just wondering, from a personal level, as a mod maker who's been working on mods like that, how did that make you feel? Were you upset by that? How did you respond?
I didn't feel. I think initially I felt on the E3 day when it appeared, when Chinese stealth suit armor appeared, and I was like, well, it's the big deal here. And then I saw Hellfire on the Creation Club net page. I was like, well, what's going on, But ultimately, I didn't really feel much after that, because generally they're quite. We've been in contact, which is public knowledge, and generally that's been no real controversy there. But I mean, it kind of shows you the difference. I mean, what I mean, in a really objective basis. I mean, I think people prefer their Chinese stealth suit, and some people prefer our Chinese stealth suit. But you kneel and you go invisible, where with ours, you do other stuff, and with the Hellfire, it's similar, if you know what I mean. So
that's true. It's good to hear you. Good to hear you say that.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I stand by Creation Club, because I think every one of us would like to see mod authors be compensated for the work they did, and people generally love these big mods, or at least these complicated, mods that people spend huge amounts of time on, that don't necessarily have to be a Bruma or an Onderall or things like that, and people would like more of them, and people can see in their heads the Creation Club or something like it facilitating that to happen more often and raising the market. But this is a kind of, I don't think this is the best way to do it, if you know what I mean.
I'm hoping for something a little bit more ambitious with Creation Club, and I've been a little bit disappointed so far in what they've offered, because so far it's just been very similar to what we can find on the mod marketplace, which I understand why they're doing it, and things like that sell well. But when it comes to one of my great hopes with the Creation Club is that we would be able to find mini DLCs. I mean, when they come out and say, oh, the Creation Club is going to be giving you things that are very similar to mini DLCs, and then we just get Hellfire armor. That's a little bit of our expectations have been shattered a little bit. My hope is that they'll be able to take advantage of the Creation Club to do something that we can't get elsewhere. We can get power armor elsewhere. We can get jumpsuits elsewhere. What we can't get, at least not to the quality that Bethesda could potentially make them, are new places to explore, new storylines, new things that are potentially canon that can improve our experience of Fallout 4 and make the game last even that much longer on our systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the problem is I think they've already said that it's all canon. So Morgan used spacesuit going to the sole survivor's inventory is just part of his adventure now.
Have they said that's canon? I haven't heard that anywhere. There's no way that Doom is going to be canon in the Fallout universe.
I think I remember seeing Pete Hines say it was canon. I'm really sure of this.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's no way.
Like, okay, just look at it from the. Is it you have to ask Bethesda? Is this extraneous to the Fallout? Because this is meant to go out to the consoles and be official content.
I mean, yeah, I understand why it should be canon, but that's one of the things that when the Creation Club was first announced, I'm like, oh great, we get more canon content. But after seeing what they've produced, there's no way that it could be content. Stuff from completely different fictional universes. It would be just as ridiculous as if a bunch of lightsabers dropped into the Fallout universe. Yes, I understand that Bethesda has a stake in the Prey universe and the Doom universe, but that doesn't mean that they should invade the Fallout universe, right? So I don't buy that if that's what they're saying.
Well, it's not entirely without precedent. I mean, EA used to do something like that when they actually cared a bit, and when like for Dragon Age, for example, Dragon Age 2, like Dead Space 2 or something would come out at the same time as Dragon Age 2, and you'd have Dead Space armor in Dragon Age 2, but they'd find some way to make it fit in. Like it would be like the protagonist in Dead Space 2 is called Isaac or whatever, so they would call the armor in Dragon Age 2 Sir Isaac's armor or something. Or, I can't remember what it was called. There was something else where you would have, Dragon armor. If you had Dragon Age in your EA account or whatever, you would have access to Dragon armor in Mass Effect 2. So, like, that there's a precedent there. Admittedly, they make those things fit. But it's kind of like...
I don't know, it takes quite a suspension of disbelief for me to get, because we have to think about how this would exist in the universe. I understand how Bethesda's going to put it in the universe, but we have to explain how it would appear if we didn't have some god creator called Bethesda creating it. So how would a Morgan's spacesuit appear in the Fallout universe? How would Doom armor appear in the Fallout universe? Something that we can recognize from a completely different universe. How could it appear in exactly the same way in this one, unless the two were somehow connected? And they didn't do a good job of connecting those two universes.
Well, Fallout's definitely had a space age that we know nothing about. I mean, they had a space age before the nuclear war, obviously, so there's definitely like a multiple ways you could fit it in. You could just have the spacesuit appear under mysterious circumstances, because the Prey universe has these aliens and there's generally a lot of intrigue going on. So you could have a slice of that. You could walk into a space museum or something like that. Obviously, that requires an interior to be made, so obviously we're pushing...
But we know aliens in the Fallout universe. Our experience with every alien life form in the Fallout universe is very different from the alien experiences in Prey, right? So now we've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
It just adds layers upon layers of complexity that we have to explain away if we really want it to be lore-friendly, when the easiest explanation is that it's just not lore-friendly.
But even if they did that, even if you walked into a space museum and you saw a space capsule and you saw the Prey outfit, and then you looked up and one of the wee mugs that they have in Fallout 4 shakes a little bit, from a is it a mimic? You never find it because they can't. They don't make the monster, but that would be enough for me to go, fair show, But the fact that it just beams into your Pip-Boy, ruining immersion, ruining one of the key factors of the game, immersion. One of the selling points of the game is enough to invite a huge amount of scrutiny.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to playing as Spider-Man in Fallout.
Me too.
New Orleans, whatever the next game's gonna be. He could be looking for his Uncle Ben.
Yeah, that would make sense.
The next dead relative.
That's the only family member left, I think, to sort of fit in.
I don't know. My answer to that is always, if I wanted to play Spider-Man, I would play a Spider-Man game. If I wanted to play Morgan, I would play Prey. I'm not playing any of those games.
There's also the unconscious, like, you know that this is from another game. No matter how well they integrate it into the lore and they explain it, maybe they have the perfect explanation, but in the back of your mind, you know that, okay,
yeah, I agree,
are they trying to sell me
point.
something?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
It's like, okay, like, what are they trying to do really here? Do they think I'm a fool, you know? But yeah.
But it's not, I mean, this is not entirely unprecedented with Bethesda. I mean, when they put the X01, I know you did a video of this, but they put the X01 in Nuka World. As soon as you saw that, there was question. No matter how much you tried to sort of search the lore and put things together, question marks were raising over your head, like repeatedly, trying to sort of fit this together.
Yeah, I did I have to admit, I had a hard time with that one. I released a video trying to do some mental gymnastics to explain it. But that's it's a very tricky one to do. It's hard enough to explain away the existence of the X01 to begin with. We have to say that they're simply using an experimental name in Fallout 4 for the advanced power armor that we find in Fallout 2. Then we can say, okay, well then they're one and the same. But then to find it in an enclosed glass case covered in quantum paint in Nuka World, it's tricky.
You've got Fallout with Kia saying, like, they've twisted their articles so much about the advanced power armor that they've got, basically, they've come up with, the X01 is an advanced power armor developed in cooperation with the military in Nuka-Cola. So,
well, the military did lean upon John Caleb Bradburton for a lot of their a lot of the technologies. I mean, we saw in the terminal entries in Bradburton's office that they did have a contract with the United States military, and that is the official explanation for why the X01 suit is there. It's because the military was using the Beverageers, is that what they were called? The Nuka-Cola quantum engineers, or whatever they were called, to develop experiments for the military. So that is the official in-lore explanation, but still, it leaves much to be desired.
Definitely, but it flies in the face of the sort of satisfying story reason for the armor's existence in Fallout 2, because up until that point you had the Brotherhood, right? Who basically, despite being the most advanced faction in the Wasteland, were still using some relic from before the war, and the Enclave come in Fallout 2, and they basically announce themselves as a new formidable menace by saying they've developed all this new technology, and that kind of defines them. And now you've got people, doing pretzels in their head by saying, oh, well, the advanced power armor wasn't developed by the Enclave, it was developed pre-war along with the T-60 and the T-51, all within a 2-year period. Because,
well, I mean, we can still even try to attempt to explain that away by saying that the Enclave were the descendants of the U.S. government. If anyone were to have known about schematics for the X01 suit after the bombs dropped, it would have been the Enclave. And so had the United States military developed the X01 before the bombs dropped, even if it hadn't gone into wide-scale production, even if it hadn't gone beyond creating a few prototypes, which we find scattered around Boston, the Enclave would know about it. They could then take those schematics and develop the advanced suit of power armor on their own, based on pre-war schematics for the X01. So when we find the X01 in Boston, we're finding the experimental prototypes that the Enclave then used to turn into the advanced power armor in Fallout 2.
I don't know, man. It's not satisfying as big, scary new power armor from big evil faction.
True.
That's hits the heart right here. But you're saying some people found some blueprint somewhere. It doesn't. It's not satisfying.
Well,
I
maybe
think for me. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say maybe Bethesda will clarify this later in Fallout 5 or in some Creation Club DLC. Who knows?
Yeah, I was going to say. I think for me, as far as rewriting lore or just messing with the lore, it's fine if the goal is to do something creative. I mean, whether it hits or not, like the whole ghoul in the fridge thing, right? There was a lot of complaints about that, oh, it's not lore friendly or whatever, but they were trying to do something creative. I can applaud that. If it's for gameplay, okay, fine. I mean, I don't really care all that much about gameplay. Story matters more to me, but if it's for gameplay, that also is forgivable. But when you mess with the lore for financial reasons or purely cynical reasons like that, then that's when people start grabbing their pitchforks and torches and stuff like that. So but I can forgive the type of stuff. I guess I'm not that obsessed with the lore to the point where it's I can forgive it if they're trying to be creative, if they're trying to take risks, then it's okay. As far as I don't know where do you stand on that, Oxhorn?
Well, you bring up a great example. The whole Billy in the fridge thing. The thing that bothered me about that encounter is how a tiny child would be stuck in a refrigerator for 200 years, screaming to be let out, and the only person who notices is you 200 years later. And his family is literally just a hop, skip, and a jump away. You're telling me they never left their home in those 200 years to go looking for their son, and they didn't just so happen to walk by a fridge, which is right by the side of the road that they would have walked down, to hear him screaming for help? That's a bit of a stretch, you know? And this kid isn't insane. I mean, people who they spend a year in solitary confinement and they go, "Bat's not crazy," but this kid who happens to turn into a ghoul is perfectly, and he's fine. He's none the worse for wear. I don't know.
Not to mention all the gunners looking for all the slave kids. You know, they're walking up and down that.
That would be a good mod to come back to the family like a month later and they're all dead because the kid went crazy. Blood on the walls and everything.
I mean, you should add that to Tales of the Commonwealth.
Or you come out with a mod where you can rescue Billy, but he's feral, and you have to return him to his parents as a feral kid.
Well, that would be dark.
That's very dark, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like Fallout 4, I mean, when they first made those Vault Boy cartoons in like Fallout 2 or Fallout 1 or whatever, and I feel like it was meant to be a sort of counter point to all the violence and horrible death and adult themes in the games, that there was this cartoon that basically made light of it all, and that was the kind of the central theme. But I feel like, you know, when you have those intros to Fallout 4 with the cartoons, I feel like the Fallout 4 game is the same reality as those cartoons. You know, people act like cartoon characters. you know, like the ghoul and the kid, and no one has any actual pathos. Like in Bethesda games, like no character ever has internal conflict. I mean, you might have come across differently, but I feel like when you're actually playing a Bethesda game versus like an Obsidian game, Bethesda characters don't ever have doubts or have conflicts with one another. Where like you do Fallout New Vegas events and stuff like that, I feel like there's entire quests that come out of characters that have internal conflicts. Like for example, the Brotherhood quest with Elder McNamara. That entire quest line comes from the fact that he's scared to death of the NCR and won't admit it.
I hear what you're saying. I would disagree, because I think there are plenty of conflicts in Fallout 4 that are really deep conflicts, and they really challenge the player to make a thoughtful decision. What I think the difference that you're noticing is a difference in storytelling ability between Obsidian and Bethesda. Bethesda is much more restrained on the narrative that they say. They don't sit you down and say, okay, here, I'm going to tell you a story. Instead, they challenge you to pick up the story through the atmosphere and through bits and pieces, and you have to put a lot more work into assembling the conflicts and assembling the story. Whereas with Obsidian, I mean, I'll never forget talking with Chief Hanlon, pardon me, at the top of Camp Golf, to get his story about Joshua Graham and what he did for the NCR in the Battle of Hoover Dam. You sit down and he talks at you for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I recorded the entire thing. It's a 45-minute conversation with Chief Hanlon at the top of Camp Golf. When you hop into the sink in Old World Blues and you get introduced to all of those little robots talking at you, it's an hour-long conversation where they're just spouting lore at you, right? And you have very few moments like that in Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. So it's just a very different method of telling the story. One is very verbose. They're just telling you the narrative. And the other is less spoken and more contextual. You gotta kind of piece it together yourself from bits and pieces, little clues that are left around. So I think the conflict in a Bethesda game is there. You gotta hunt for it.
Is that the inspiration for the channel, more or less? The fact that you're hunting for these clues and piecing it together, and putting it into a format like with YouTube that makes it sort of easier to convey or to tell the story?
Honestly, yeah, that was one of my main inspirations. One of the things, so I mean, I first started making videos for my channel. I was focused on settlement building and mods and the technical, like when Nuka World came out, I didn't do any Nuka World lore. I focused on trying to understand the settlement system. But then I would get one of the reasons I moved to lore was because I got a lot of comments from people who were confused by the story of Fallout 4, things that I thought were obvious because I had discovered some things in my gameplay, and then I realized, well, it's just because people haven't seen these terminals or listened to these holotapes. And so I wanted to piece together a lot of these narrative elements into cohesive stories that you could watch in episodic content so that people could better understand the narrative, better understand the lore. And it's been hugely rewarding for me because I get to revisit these places and I get to better understand it myself by putting together the stories. And I think viewers have really enjoyed it because they walk away going, oh, I had no idea that the Institute had surveillance synth crows that were flying around the Commonwealth spying on me the entire time. Now I understand the paranoia that people have about synths, right? That kind of thing you don't normally get unless you look for it.
Do you think that Bethesda does a good job with making that content accessible, or do you think it's like buried too far?
Honestly, I would love them to bury more, even deeper. It's one of those things where, you know, you've got two different kinds of players, and I'm both of them. You know, when I first played Fallout 4, I was the first kind of player where the story was secondary to being immersed in the world and the gunplay. I really loved the gunplay and the modding system and getting my character built up. That's what I focused on. The story, okay, I was kind of along for the ride, but I didn't delve too deeply into it. And many players are just going to go through the game and play with the gunplay and they're going to finish it and they're good to go. And then there are players who are more like what I was the second time I went through the game. And I got the gunplay and I got the fighting and I got the gameplay. I really wanted to understand the story. And so you spend more time meticulously going over every inch of every dungeon and really trying to figure out what Bethesda is trying to say here, what these characters' true motivations were. And it's there if you look for it. And that's what I love about the game. There are still some places where I'll walk away saying, oh man, I still have so many questions. I wish they could leave a few more holotapes or bury something a little bit deeper for me to find because I feel like there's so much more they could have done with this. But most of the time I'm still fairly satisfied with the story that I walk away with.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's a more fun way to play. I mean, it gives the game itself more depth because the gunplay is something that's consistent usually throughout all video games. So it's easier to get more fatigue doing that kind of activity. I mean, I guess it's fun in its own right, but it's kind of repetitive is the word I'm looking for, because like it's the same mechanics. You're shooting a gun, you know, you're moving your mouse and your cursor or whatnot. Pretty much like all the action and violence is the same throughout almost all third-person shooters. But once you start going into the like lore, into investigating and finding little details like that, and finding how everything connects, it's an aspect that a Fallout game, an open world game, has that a lot of other mediums don't. So I do think that like you found a good niche there.
I completely agree. When it comes to first-person shooters, honestly, I've never been the kind of player to sit down and, you know, just play a first-person shooter. Like, I've never been the kind to sit down and really enjoy Doom or really enjoy Wolfenstein. I appreciate
except for that ab window. That
ab window, man, that's sexy. That's sexy, right? Yeah. But you're right. I mean, the gunplay for Fallout, it has meaning because of the lore. I can't really enjoy the gunplay in Fallout unless there's a meaning behind what I'm doing. Like, I'm not going to go to the castle and set up all of these huge artillery turrets and then set up defenses and then really enjoy my gunplay unless I realize, well, I got to take down the Pridwen, or I got to defend against a synth attack. And then I understand the motives behind each faction and why they're doing it. And suddenly all that gunplay has meaning because I've uncovered a bit of the lore. That's what's intriguing to me about Fallout 4 and the Fallout franchise just in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest part for me for the game, playing the game, is roleplay. I mean, I definitely like, in a first-person game, you're playing someone else's role, where with Fallout 4, you get to be somewhere else. You get to be the person you design, as it were. And that's generally... Yeah,
I think you're right, but again, I think there are two kinds of players even when it comes to role playing, and I happen to be the secondary kind. There's the first kind who sits down and he really embodies his character. He creates a character to be an extension of himself so that he can put himself into the world and make decisions as he would. I tend to be the second kind of player who I'm creating a completely different person. I'm still role playing. I'm just not role playing as myself. I'm creating somebody else, and I'm trying to make decisions as I think that person would, which is why I have 3 or 4 different characters, each which sided with different factions, and I'll make a decision based upon that person. Like, I hate the Institute. I would never side with them, but I made a character that sided with the Institute, and when I'm playing that character, I try to make decisions that an Institute director would make in that situation. And for me, that's a lot of fun I get out of it.
But no Spider-Man.
but no Spider-Man, no. I'll leave the web slinging to a completely different set of games.
Do you play Skyrim at all? I mean, the latest Skyrim Creation Club seems to be rearing its head. So do you play Elder Scrolls?
Well, I played Skyrim for the first time last year when viewers started to say, hey, Oxhorn, if you're good at Fallout, you would really enjoy Skyrim. And so I did some Skyrim live streams, and I beat the main plot. I have to admit that the game didn't resonate with me. And it may just be that it's because it's a genre that I'm not really interested in right now. I was really into fantasy games when I was a bit younger, when I was in my 20s, and not that there's anything wrong I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Skyrim, but there's only so many times that you can kill a dragon, right? Every single freaking fantasy game or fantasy movies out there, you got a dragon here and a dragon there, and you're the dragonborn, and I can speak with the dragons, and the dragons are flying, and I'm like, all right, so we got dragons and vampires, and it's just the thing I love about Fallout is things are a little bit different. You're fighting enemies that are not always the same. They're not always fantasy tropes.
Is there any concern as far as like the Fallout games? Like if there's no Fallout game for another 6 or 7 years, like as far as content for your channel, are you gonna like go to other games that are similar genre to Fallout, or do you think you're just gonna delve deeper into like older Fallout lore?
Yeah, yes and no. I think that I've got plenty of material to work with for the foreseeable future. I cracked open the lids to Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. I'm cranking out content, and I've only scratched the surface. There's a lot more I can do. I haven't even finished.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I haven't even finished everything in Fallout 4 yet, so there's plenty there that I can still do. But there are other games that I am experimenting with. Every single week I do a live stream where I play the Metro series, which has been a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And I've also been toying with... There are 2 games that I'm kind of interested in. I'm not sure if I really want to dig into them just yet, but the Red Dead Redemption series I think would work really good for my channel, because the Wild West is the closest thing you're going to get to a post-apocalypse in the real world, because it's a frontier, right? There were no laws, there were no rules in the Wild West. You sort of had to survive and make your own morality, which is really interesting. So I might tango with that. And then L.A. Noire seems like a really interesting game. I never played it when it came out, but looking at some of the gameplay attributes of it looked really interesting to me, and I may be able to do content on that. So there's plenty of options out there. I just haven't decided where I want to go yet.
So L.A. Noire, would you do GTA? I don't know if they have... That's kind of similar in a sense. I mean, as a whole world with little stories in it. I suppose it's probably a little bit too off track for you, I guess.
Yeah, it's a bit off track. My wife really liked GTA 5 when it came out, because she enjoyed the social aspect of that game. I'm not really fond of social games. I did a lot of World of Warcraft back in the day, and I think I'm done playing with people. I don't want to play with people anymore.
When people say
no more bowling.
When people say they want to make Fallout multiplayer, I'm just like, oh, please don't, Bethesda, don't listen to them.
Yeah, I'm not keen on that. I'm good. I don't need a multiplayer Fallout game. Well, I love being able to just go at my own pace. That's one of the things I love about Fallout. You don't have to sign up for a raid. You don't have to spend 8 hours in a dungeon waiting for the raid boss to tell you when to move or where to go. You go at your own pace. You discover things when you want to. You look in the containers that you want to look into. You can sit down and read a terminal. It's much more leisurely that way. And then when you want a fast-paced gun battle, you can find a fast-paced gun battle. I like that vibe when it comes to my gaming.
Do you like playing with companions or alone?
It depends on the mood that I'm in. I typically bring a companion with me for my videos when I shoot footage, simply because I enjoy seeing their reactions. But more times than not, my companions will get really annoying. They're not going to be helpful in the battle. They kind of get in the way. Or when they do say something, it's the same thing over and over again, and it gets annoying. So I don't know. It just depends on the mood that I'm in at the time.
Complaining about picking up trash and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the funniest part, is the Fallout 4 companions must have about like 1,500 to 2,000 lines of dialogue, which dwarfs the Fallout New Vegas companions, but it's like they have much less to say. I know you've actually done companion videos where you actually, made them seem rounded and interesting.
I did, and I don't understand, because you're right. Bethesda went to all of the effort to record thousands of lines of dialogue for each companion, and you learn things by delving into the code that you otherwise wouldn't get in the gameplay. I don't understand why sometimes in the game you just don't have access to stuff. So when I did my recent video, I did a profile video on Curie. I had to install a mod that came up recently on the Nexus that unlocked a lot of the dialogue that you normally wouldn't have access to because it just doesn't come up in the normal everyday conversations with that character. I had to install that mod just so that I could have more diversity of conversations with Curie that I could then share with my viewers on my channel. And I'm frustrated that I had to install that mod to gain access to the stuff that was in the game to begin with. I
appreciated the fact there was like a lot of lines, but most of the lines were just kind of, I'm not saying inane, but they're...
Well, I think it's a ratio problem. Like I mentioned this last week, I think it's just where you have 2,000 lines, but only about 100 of them are repeated constantly because you're constantly hitting trigger boxes that say complain about the trash, complain about the smell. Those trigger boxes are in every cell and they're everywhere in the world. So those 100 or so lines are repeated like constantly over and over again. They're like 50% of the stuff you hear. And then the other half, all the unique stuff, you only hear once or twice per playthrough, right?
Exactly. So, I used to have all of my companions at my player home settlement in Fallout 4. And it became so annoying because I would get back to my home and I'd be modding one weapon and then all of a sudden every single companion at the same time would decide to express their thoughts on it. And they'd be talking over each other. And then Curie would be walking around saying the same 3 things over and over again. But then I installed Deeper Thoughts Curie, the mod called Deeper Thoughts Curie. And now when she's wandering around my settlement, she has a different thing to say each time. And I'm fine having her hang around because they've unlocked more things for her to say, which I don't understand why it wasn't that way to begin with.
I think all the Fallout 4 characters have some sort of interesting aspect to them, but somehow they've made them all seem quite annoying. Even Preston, taking Preston to Nuka World makes him interesting because if you roleplay as a Minuteman going to Nuka World and he's your fellow Minuteman, he has something to say about being the 2 Minutemen being outnumbered by all the raiders, and suddenly he becomes an interesting character. So it's and even Kate, which you've done videos on, which and Nick obviously, but ultimately they seem for some reason the companions only echo the gameplay loop of collecting junk and killing things and collecting more junk and building things, and all the rest of them seems to be off in some other alternative Fallout 4.
Yeah, I really like Preston Garvey as a companion. I did a video on him as well, and the reason people are annoyed by him is simply because of the way that Bethesda implemented the Radiant Minuteman quests. Mm-hmm. The great error that they did is you talk with Preston Garvey and you get a new quest, and that's the frustrating thing. You want to know more about this character, you don't necessarily want to go on another go kill raiders at this place quest and have it automatically be put into your quest log. Instead, you want to talk with Preston and get to know the guy, and there's plenty to get to know. He's an interesting multi-dimensional character once you lift up the hood, but sadly that hood is clamped down shut by all of these silly Radiant quests you're forced to do. Because you're right, he is a deeper character, and he's really fascinating after you install Nuka World.
But unfortunately, he's gonna live on as a meme. That's what people are gonna remember him as. They're gonna remember as a meme.
I can't tell you, every single video I publish, you've got some guy who thinks he's clever, leaving a comment saying, "General, another settlement needs your help." Yes, we get it.
No, it depends if it's creative or not, or if they just literally come as Preston Garvey and say, "There's another settlement needs your help. I'll mark it on your map." Or if they really play with it and make it interesting.
They don't. No, they have the avatar of Preston Garvey, the YouTube name, Preston Garvey, and they just say, "Here, General, I'll mark it on your map." Every single video. There's one guy.
Do you think that guy just spends his whole life?
Yeah. He must.
Going from YouTube channel to YouTube channel.
This is how he gets his kicks. He searches for Fallout gaming channels on YouTube and just says, "General, another settlement needs your help." Video after video. Like, this is his life. What?
But to be fair, the other funny one I quite like is the Todd Howard meme, where he turns up in disguise, trying to sell you Skyrim. Have you seen that one? Where he's like Todd Howardvich or something. He says, "Hello, I am Todd Howardvich. I heard Skyrim is on sale," or something.
Yes, that one's clever. That one gives me a good chuckle.
Yeah. So, just to sort of round this out, I mean, you made your just beginning of that modding philosophy video when Bethesda terribly disappointing you by defying every principle you've defined. What is your opinion on quest mods? Like, you say other me making Hellfire or Chinese stealth suit, might fall under your principles, for example. But say Kris makes Tales of the Commonwealth or interesting NPCs for Skyrim. What would be your opinion on them?
Great.
I have conflicting opinions on that because I greatly appreciate the time and effort that goes into a quest mod, and I love the fact that a modder is going to sit down and examine the lore and honestly try to create something that's lore friendly. And I love that amount of effort that goes into it. But I tend not to install or play those mods because I wanna, if I'm gonna throw myself into this world, I want to throw myself into a world that's canon. Mm-hmm. I can appreciate a story that somebody else is telling, and I love that. And sometimes I'll install an adventure mod, right, and review an adventure mod because I'm going on some deep, dark adventure into some crazy dungeon or hole, and those are always fun. But if I'm going to be doing a series on lore, I need to make sure that there's not going to be any confusion between some non-canonical lore that a really clever and creative modder put out and real canon lore. Because the problem with that is that sometimes viewers don't understand the difference. They'll start commenting on videos I publish later saying, oh, that's not actually in lore because I remember you talked about in this one video about something, and I have to say, no, that's not canon. Mm-hmm. A modder made that up, and it can sometimes confuse things.
Yeah, but you get things like where the horsepower armor, and I think you actually asked in the video, is this breaking the fourth wall with the guy making his pony armor? I guess it kind of is plausible within world.
Yeah, that one I actually think is okay. And I said in that video because Bethesda, instead of just making it a cheap joke of the horse armor, that would have frustrated me. Instead of doing that, they made it make sense. They put it in the middle of the Wilson Automatoys factory. They put a dead raider on the ground. He had some story. We understand why he was there, why he made the power armor. We get the lore for why it exists. They put the effort in. Okay, cool. Yes, it's a joke, but it also makes sense in the world, so I'm okay with the horsepower armor. They didn't do that with the Hellfire. And that's what frustrated me about the Hellfire, because the Hellfire is so cool. It's got this, we get it in Fallout 3, and it's part of the Enclave, and there's so much lore in there. They could have created this awesome Enclave dungeon, and they could have done so much with it. And they didn't. They put it on some guy named Pyro hanging outside the Saugus Ironworks that you kill. What? Doesn't make any sense.
Like, I think they did the quest in the day. They were just like, oh, Pyro, Hellfire, get it? Oh, whatever, publish.
Exactly. That's just lazy.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, it's like, what about my mods, for example, when I put a dungeon somewhere in the Glowing Sea? Does that become uncanon? Like, does that break a principle, as it were, like compared to, like, Kris's mod or something? Or
well, there are two different things. There's breaking the world, and then there's the canon, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have a quest mod that's got a lot of wonderful lore and story that fits in the world, and I can enjoy that as being lore friendly. But it's not going to be canon, because only Bethesda at this point is going to be able to create lore that's canon. Modders can be true to the world as much as they want and tell wonderful stories that are true to the world, but it's not going to be canon because Bethesda didn't create it.
Well, I mean, like, so for me, it's like when I play Fallout 4, I can't do the dungeon thing. I can't turn my game into that. So I always install like Kris's mod, for example, because he makes quests that actually feel like Fallout 3/New Vegas quests that don't feel like I'm being pulled into another dungeon type thing. So there's that kind of thing, which might fall under the...
Yeah, I get what Oxhorn is saying though, because you've got a YouTube channel, you're trying to deliver correct lore and instruct people. It's important to kind of keep your game canon in that regard. Mm. I don't know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think that's where he's going with that.
No, you're exactly right. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and whereas when you're just playing for fun or whatever, you're going to install whatever mods you want, and if they're lore friendly, that's even better if you're a person who likes immersion. But it's different when you have a sort of responsibility, like a curator almost, of this kind of lore, and as a person who has influence and is conveying information, you want to make sure it's canon.
If I didn't have a YouTube channel, and if I was just playing the game for my own personal enjoyment, I'd install all sorts of storyline mods, and I'd appreciate the ones that were more lore friendly. I could go through that experience, you spend a day doing the mod dungeon, have a great time, and it still feels like part of the world. It doesn't knock me out of it. But when I have to tell a story, I have to make sure that I let people know whether or not it's canon or not.
So, you already told us about the possibility of doing LA Noire stuff or Red Dead Redemption stuff. What other things are you looking forward to in the future of your channel? What other things would you like to do? Well, I'm so focused on Fallout right now that's my bread and butter. That's what I'm focused on. For the foreseeable future, that's what I'm going to be doing. For my live streams, I finished Metro 2033. I'm doing Metro
Last Light right now, and then I believe they announced a new Metro game at E3, and so I'm excited about playing that on my live streams as well. But aside from that, I haven't put any thought into other games that I'll be doing on my channel. Maybe Red Dead Redemption, maybe LA Noire, depending on how the fans react. But that's all up in the air.
Is live stream just more off the cuff, or you're just playing the game? It's a let's play kind of thing.
Yeah, I do a live show every week called Scotch and Smoke Rings, where I sit down and drink scotch and smoke cigars and just chat with the viewers. That's my big break of the week, and then I'll play a game with folks. It used to be Overwatch, sometimes it was Hearthstone, and now I'm playing a lot of Metro, which I'm really enjoying.
All right, so I think that wraps up for me. Kris, do you have any other questions for Oxhorn or?
Nah, I'm good. We went like an hour, right? That's good time.
Yeah. Ox, thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
It was a blast. I love everything you guys do. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, man.
Thanks for coming on.
All right, guys, we're out. All right, Ox, do you have the you recording in WAV or MP3?